Halftime show, Terry Ford, Ed Bird, back for day 3, hopefully with candy as we hang out here. He's got the bag. Oh, look at that. He's got the bag. The Werthers are here. So we'll be eating candy from Ed Bird during the breaks. And also talking some obvious South Carolina baseball coach, rumor mill, search tidbits. Chris Clark put up a really good post on Gamecock Central about the search. We're going to dig into it a little bit piece by piece, what Chris was saying. But, I mean, the big picture from what Chris Clark put out was, nobody's turned down South Carolina. Everything's still going along in the process. Candidates are still candidates. And, obviously, and I heard, I always hear this one, this is going to happen sooner than later. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it will. But, I feel like, again, a lot of things you're hearing, who knows what's true and what's not, right? I think some of the names we've discussed, like a Cliff Godwin in East Carolina, there were some rumblings or some, statements put out that maybe Godwin had turned down South Carolina, and Chris Clark said, no, has not happened. I think the people we've talked about in the mix in some way, shape, or form might still be in the mix. There's talk that, South Carolina has talked to Tom Walter at Wake Forest. Where that's going, who knows? Dan McClellan's name has still been thrown out there at Louisville. Monty Lee's in the mix here, the interim coach at South Carolina right now. I mean, so a lot of the names we've talked about, it doesn't seem like anybody has been publicly knocked out of the running. Now, is there a pecking order? Maybe Ray's got that secret pecking order in his desk drawer, but it feels like this right now has been close to the vest, which I got no problem with. I think that's what you do. To be honest, keep it close to the vest. You're trying to figure this thing out. Now, that's easier said than done today, right? Keeping things close to the vest used to be much easier than it is today. Because it seems like there's leakage almost everywhere anymore in sports. Very few organizations / programs are successful in keeping everything in-house. Because somebody somewhere is going to say something to someone, and it gets out, especially in our world, where you got social media and somebody will say, hey, my next-door neighbor's aunt works for the program or the organization or whatever, and she heard 2 people talking about this today. It happens. It's very difficult to keep a secret now. Because, we're a society of yappers just in theory, but now we have all these platforms to get our yapping out that we can't keep a secret. But so far, nothing really has leaked out concrete of where this thing's going yet. But got candidates all over the place. And we're going to talk with Jordan Kay from The State, who's been covering this for the State newspaper, 2:30. Jordan will give us his thoughts and his views on where this whole thing's going. And we have reached out to some different people who cover these different programs for these coaches. And we got Drew Diener the other day talking about Dan McDonnell from 93.9 The Ville and 680 ESPN Louisville. And we'll keep reaching out. Maybe we can track some folks down who can give us some insight from their vision, because they're there where these coaches are. So we'll keep digging and see what we can find. Also on the show, we're going to pop up some audio. Nice work by Jay and Elijah on the postgame show yesterday. Had John Whittle on from the Big Spur, and we'll get John's thoughts on the coaching search. Also, Ryan McGee gave his perspective as well. Ryan McGee, of course, from ESPN. By the way, that Ryan and Marty show on weekends is great. It just is. But Ryan McGee will give us his perspective. We'll re-rack some of his perspective on the coaching search for South Carolina, SEC baseball, things of that nature. So we got all that coming up. Also, obviously, the big national story is about Danny Hurley, the head coach at UConn, possibly leaving Storrs, Connecticut to take over the LA Laker head coaching gig. And I think that's interesting in a few different ways, not just the story itself of the Lakers possibly trying to hire Danny Hurley, but what does it say about, being a coach in high-level collegiate sports these days? And we'll get more into this in a little bit, but let's face it. If you're a college coach, football, basketball, and a professional team, NFL, NBA, wants to hire you and pay you stupid guaranteed money, why not? I mean, if you get fired, you can always come back to college, right? And look, we'll go over this in a little bit, the history of college basketball coaches who take NBA gigs. Ugh. Ugh. But why not? I mean, you're going to get a ton of money. It's guaranteed dough. And you can always go back to college if it doesn't work out. 2, how crazy is this? You have more control in the NBA now than you do in college. You have a process and a system that makes sense. You got none of that in college right now. You control so little as a collegiate head coach. You have more control in the pros. I know. You don't have that much because, again, NBA players, they're making more than you, a lot of them. And they're grown men with families and they're adults, and you can't just, deal with them like you would college players, even though college players have been older lately. Still, they're college players. So it's a different world. In the NBA, you got this thing called the collective bargaining agreement. You got salary cap, even though the salary cap is crazy in the NBA with all the different exemptions and aprons and all this other stuff. But the NBA has a salary cap. And player movement makes sense. Not in college anymore. Unlimited transfers, all this NIL, you have so little control as a college head coach. But you're expected to win at the same level you always have. Again, I'm not feeling sorry for you. You get paid well for the gig. But if you're Danny Hurley, man, I've won back-to-back NCAA championships. Can I win a third? I mean, I want to. I want to try, I believe, but that's really difficult. Nobody's done that since UCLA. The world is changing in college athletics. I'm going to deal with all these things that I didn't sign up for, and there's no parameters or rules in place. Man, that's a lot of money the NBA's offering me. And yeah, not that the Lakers are the most well-run organization. They're not. I mean, their GM, the best thing he's got going for me, looks like Rob Lowe. So it's not like you're going to the Lakers where, they are a beacon of stability. But again, it's the Lakers. And the word is, they actually want to build a real franchise and not just go superstar hunting. So I don't know, we'll get more into it later, but very interesting story as it relates to college coaching. If Danny Hurley would take off and go. Does it mean anything more than just, wow, man, that's a lot of money? That's the Lakers. I'll give it a shot. Could there be more involved in the world of, oh, man, I'll have less headaches in the pro game than I will here in college now? I don't know. We'll talk about that later. Also get some college football, some interesting stuff digging up for our football segment between 1 and 2 o'clock. Just some stuff. Stuart Mandel had some interesting thoughts in his mailbag this week on The Athletic we want to get into. And some other things. Mandel was asked an interesting question about what team that's going to be in the preseason top 10 do you see becoming an unranked team by the end of the year? And Mandel pointed to me at the obvious one. We'll get into that later, too. But we'll circle back to the big story, which is South Carolina's baseball search. We're going to hear in the next segment John Whittle, when John was on the postgame show yesterday with Jay and Elijah, his thoughts on the search, Monty Lee, how polarizing Monty Lee's name is in this whole thing. Financial aspect of the hiring we'll get into. A bunch of different stuff John Whittle discussed with Jay and Elijah. We're going to rack up some John coming up next here on the Halftime Show. You could always listen to us everywhere. Well, yeah, we're getting there everywhere. But, here in Columbia, 107.5 The Game. In Florence, 100.5 The Game. Myrtle Beach, 100.3 The Game. Also, download the 107.5 The Game app. You go to iTunes, Google Play, drop that baby on your phone. Listen to us anywhere that has cell service. Or we have a YouTube channel, Game TV. You go to YouTube at The Game TV Radio. It's sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, powered by Integrated Media. You just hit that baby and you can actually watch this stuff. You can see us talk in our studio about sports and make fun of our clothes and our hair, or lack of. So many different ways you can hang out with us here on The Game. All right, we'll come back here. John Whittle, what he had to say about this whole South Carolina baseball coaching search on the postgame show yesterday with Jay and Elijah. We'll play some cuts from John and give you our thoughts and comments. Ed Bird's here. Terry Ford, halftime show till 3 here on The Game. Halftime show. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging out with us. Ed Bird's here as we roll till 3 on the game in Columbia, Florence, and Myrtle Beach. All right, going to get to some of Chris Clark's comments. Gamecock Central post about the coaching search. Basically, it's titled "Latest on the South Carolina Baseball Coaching Search." It popped up about 20 hours ago. Chris's thoughts. We're going to get to those in case you haven't seen them on GamecockCentral.com. Also, John Whittle from the Big Spur was on the postgame show with Jay and Elijah yesterday. We're going to pop that up here in just a minute. Our Twitter X poll, this is day 3, our final day of our coaching candidate bracket, our first round. We've done 3 of these. It's the third one, 10 candidates. We're going to take the winners of the 3 and put them up on a final poll and let you pick out of the finalists about who you would select as the head baseball coach of South Carolina. All right, today, here are the candidates. Chris Lemonis, Mississippi State. Josh Jordan, LSU assistant. Landon Powell. Skylar Meade, Troy. Right now, Chris Lemonis at 43%, Landon Powell at 31%, Skylar Meade 16%, Josh Jordan, LSU assistant at 11%. We're 23 minutes into the poll. We already have 75 votes. So feel free to jump in and just give us your opinion on the candidates, which direction you would go. And like I said, we're going to take the winners of the last 3 days and put them into a final Twitter X poll. And we'll get to yesterday's poll, which was quite interesting, by the way. We basically had a tie yesterday. So we're going to get into that. So we'll probably have both candidates that tied in with the day 1 winner and today's winner. So we'll have 4 final candidates. But very interesting tie yesterday in our Twitter X poll. I'll get to that here in just a little bit. All right, according to Chris Clark, Chris begins his post by just saying he wanted to hit up some of the items that have been floating around on the message boards for Gamecock Central. According to Chris, candidates are still being vetted in the search process. No offers have been extended, nor has anyone turned down South Carolina at this point. Chris also says he would stop short of saying if there is a surefire front runner at this time. And there has been some talk circulating that East Carolina's Cliff Godwin has turned the Gamecocks down already. Chris Clark says his understanding is that is not true. And Chris does say about Godwin, he gets the sense that Godwin is someone South Carolina is quite interested in for this position. I've said this before. He is kind of like the sweet spot of this thing. He is very well respected nationally. Has taken East Carolina to the Supers multiple times. Is looked at as a guy that if you gave him a power conference gig with the power conference resources and support of a baseball-loving community in a power league, that's what Cliff Godwin would need to kick the door in and make it to Omaha. And, of course, South Carolina fits that bill. But you're not going to break the bank on Cliff Godwin. Right now he's making $600,000 at East Carolina. The thought is if you gave him $850,000 and he is interested, or maybe making that much more than you're making now makes you interested, then you could possibly get him to come to South Carolina and you wouldn't be cracking the $1 million barrier. And you get a guy, again, who's very well respected nationally and a guy who has been on the cusp of Omaha multiple times from East Carolina. So to me, he's like the sweet spot candidate where baseball folks will nod their head going, yep, good hire. I think most of the fan base would go, yeah, I get that guy. Okay, that's a guy. That's a guy. Okay, I see that one. And then for South Carolina's purposes, you're not spending over $1 million to get what a lot of people think is a very quality head coach. So I think he's that guy that would check a lot of the boxes here for, I guess, the agendas, for lack of a better term. All right, here is John Whittle on the postgame show. Let's start off with this one, Ed Bird. Let's get cut 7. John was asked by Jay and Elijah about the status of the job search right now.
Well, I mean, we're what time is it? A little after 4. We're 55 hours into this thing. Since Mark Kingston was relieved of his duties on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. We're early in this. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been necessarily eliminated. You know, I know myself and others have put Kevin O'Sullivan's name out there. I don't think that one's gonna happen for a multitude of reasons. But I don't know that he's been eliminated necessarily. And you know, if Monty Lee were absolutely the guy, it'd be done by now. He's sitting over there in the office recruiting. You know, he's got visitors coming on campus starting tomorrow from out of the transfer portal. Like, they're trying to recruit and try to get players. And you know, if they were going to go ahead and make Monty Lee the head coach, they'd do it right now. So you know, there's still things going on besides the decision having been made. And you know, when you're 2 days removed from a hiring, like, it doesn't usually happen quite that fast. So I mean, there's certainly some things going on.
I think one of the things John said there was the most interesting, and I've heard this from multiple people who know a heck of a lot more about the inner workings of all this than me, who have been around here a lot longer. And they say, look, if Monty Lee was the guy, definitely the guy, Monty Lee'd already be hired. The idea that Monty Lee hasn't been hired already doesn't mean he's not in the mix. I think Monty Lee's in the mix. But it's not like Monty Lee's definitely the guy, we're just going through some motions and whatever. Because like John said, you know, if he is your guy and you know he's your guy, then forget the dog and pony show. Just make him the coach, and then he can recruit. He can try to keep his guys from hitting the portal. He can, you know, start recruiting the portal himself as the head coach at South Carolina, not just the interim. So that makes perfect sense what John just said. And again, I've heard that from a couple other people too who have said, Tara, Monty eventually could get the job, but I don't think it's his right now, because if it was, he'd have it, which makes sense. All right. Also, John talking with Jay and Elijah, John Whittle, they discussed the financial aspect of this hiring. Cut 9, Ed Bird.
I mean, South Carolina, I don't know that they can do whatever it takes for anything. I mean, this is the University of South Carolina. There's limited resources here. I mean, this isn't Texas A&M. Texas A&M can do whatever it takes. They can go give Jimbo Fisher a 100% guaranteed contract for 10 years or whatever it was to get him to leave Florida State, you know, very shortly after winning a national championship. Like, that's whatever it takes. South Carolina, I don't think, can do whatever it takes really in anything, but, you know, certainly in a sport that is very important, but also, you know, doesn't exactly, you know, fill the bank account. You know, it's a break-even type of sport, but it's very important. So, you know, I do think that South Carolina can go out there and make it work with a bunch of different candidates. Now, they aren't going to pay Kevin O'Sullivan type of money to Skylar Meade, but if they want to get Kevin O'Sullivan, I don't know if they can make that one work. Florida would have to want to leave Florida, and Florida would want to have to let him go. But I think that they could probably pull that off. Can they pull off Cliff Godwin from East Carolina if he decided he wanted to come? Absolutely. Like, his buyout's not prohibitive. His salary's not prohibitive. I mean, if you start talking $2 million for a baseball coach and a $2 million buyout, like you might have to have with Kevin Sullivan, then yeah, that's probably not going to work out. But, you know, there are good options out there that South Carolina can easily make work, and I think they could probably make you know, just about anything work as long as it's not too crazy.
You know, we discussed this yesterday, that it's going to cost you to go get a high-level dude or a dude like we talk about, typically between $1 million and $1.5 million, except for Cliff Godwin, who you can get for under $1 million. But you got to spend to get a guy. You just do. You're going to pay more than you paid Mark Kingston at whatever rate. But no, I think most folks understand that giving Kevin O'Sullivan $2 million and paying a multi-million-dollar buyout, that's just, I think most folks understand when you say, South Carolina can't do that. Makes sense. But, if you're going to pay a coach 1.3, 1.4, have to pay a buyout that's, around $1 million, the fan base is going to say, you can do that, right? Can't you? So I think there's a level, a crazy level that you don't expect South Carolina to go to, but you do expect, because look, the SEC right now, we talked about this. There's very few baseball coaches in the SEC not making $1 million. So it's not like only a few are getting over $1 million. No, most of them are making over $1 million at this point. That's the price of admission for the most part, except again, if you go after Godwin at East Carolina, you probably get him for $800, $850, maybe $9. And you're still not busting over the seven-figure threshold. But you're going to have to spend more money, in my opinion, than you paid for Mark Kingston if you want to get a true dude with a resume that either has gone to Omaha or has been knocking the hell out of the door to get to Omaha from the Supers multiple times. But we'll get more John Whittle here coming back. Some interesting stuff from John. We'll look at the time frame of the hiring and also the polarizing candidacy of Monty Lee. That's coming up next. John Whittle on the postgame show with Jay and Elijah. We'll get that in our next segment. Craft Beer Card is back. $30 a brewery, 12 craft beer locations, 30 times 12, $360. That's what typically would cost you to make that tour. Only $79 if you grab the Craft Beer Card. Go to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals, bang. You have yourself $360 worth of drinking for only $79. Halftime show, we'll hear some more of John Whittle from his visit yesterday with Jay and Elijah. That is next here on the Halftime Show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, till 3 on the game. What you're talking about, and we're talking about, and everybody around here is talking about, is the South Carolina baseball head coaching search. Right now, we're checking out some of the thoughts of John Whittle from the Big Spur, who was on with Jay and Elijah on the postgame show yesterday. And John, we just heard him talk about the status of the search, financial aspect of the hiring. Now let's move on to, again, Monty Lee has become, we talked about this yesterday, a very polarizing figure in the search. There's a portion of this fan base who would love to have Monty Lee. Coach with Ray Tanner, understands the Tanner way, which was obviously the iconic level of this baseball program. You know, Monty Lee's been a head coach, 2 different stops. There's the thought that, you know, maybe third time's a charm for Monty Lee. Maybe he's learned a lot from College of Charleston and Clemson. Things he'd do different, things he'd do better. You know, he's a South Carolina guy. He understands this fan base, this area, this community. And there's folks that say, no. They're very passionate that they don't want to see Monty Lee get the gig. They say 13 years as a head coach, 1 trip to the Supers. They'll say, look at what happened at the end of Clemson. You know, they'll say, are you just hiring Monty Lee because he was your guy, Ray Tanner, or because you can get him cheaper than everybody else? And there are people that say, no, let's get a fresh voice in here. And there's folks who say, no, this isn't moving forward. It's just kind of standing still. So there's a lot of different thoughts on this thing with Monty Lee. Here's John Whittle. Ed Bird, let's get cut 6. Talking about the polarizing candidacy of Monty Lee.
Yeah, I mean, definitely reading the Big Spur mess board. There's definitely some polarization. Or you can look at it as not very polarizing. It almost seems like folks are uniting against the idea. You know, I don't see it as a disaster, but I understand why folks are very apprehensive about that. You know, he went up to the rival school and had some success early and didn't have some success late and was let go. But, you know, it's, I guess, a little bit of a different situation around here. Monty Lee's a South Carolina guy. He's been in the program and, you know, knows what it takes to be successful around here. He's been part of a team that went to a super regional last year and, you know, underachieved a little bit this year, obviously. But, you know, he's been in it and, you know, knows the good and knows what needs to be fixed. So, you know, I don't think it's as bad as some of the vocal folks out there are letting on.
There's John saying, message boards are on fire about Monty Lee, and he thinks a lot of them don't want to see it. Now, John doesn't think it'd be as big a disaster as other people think it might be. Look, Monty Lee's a good baseball coach. Look at his record. He's a good baseball coach, made the NCAAs, I think, in 13 full seasons, made the tournament 8 times, if my memory serves me. And like I say, only 1 trip to the Supers. But, I mean, winning record, again, getting to the dance, all those things Monty Lee did at College of Charleston and at Clemson until those final 2 years upstate when he didn't make the tournament and then lost the gig. But if you look at his just resume, career record, year by year, at his 2 stops, you know, he's a guy, again, he'll win you 40-some games, and he'll make the NCAA tournament. But then the resume it obviously doesn't have a trip to Omaha and only 1 trip to the Supers. Good baseball coach, but is he, again, the guy that can get you back to where you need to be? That's the question that needs to be answered. All right, here's also John Whittle talking about, because, again, Monty Lee has a support of current players and recruits. How much of that support matters in this process? Well,
a little bit, but you also have to remember, like, players can leave very easily now. Like, if you're a recruit, you can decommit. I mean, even if you're a signee, you can get out of that NLI very easily. You can go into the transfer portal at any time. Like, those words mean something, but maybe not a whole heck of a lot. As bad as that may sound to some people, especially if you're a current player or a recruit. But I will say this: when you have so many players when you have so many past players, when you have so many current players, when you have so many future players who are all kind of united in that and sharing that same voice, then that's when it starts to mean a little bit more. So I do think it means something, but you can't keep a coach based on a few players or based on a few recruits or whatever else. That just can't be the thought process. This is a short-term game with current players and recruits for when you're making a long-term decision.
See, John hit it there at the end. You're building for the long term, not just for the short term. You're not just building to keep everything together for next year. You're building for the long term. You want to be able to lay down the foundation of a program with the right head coach that is going to be competitive year in and year out. And look, is it easy to be consistently competitive today as it was, you go back to the Ray Tanner era, for example? A lot harder now. I mean, you can spin a program a lot quicker because of the transfer portal. But you can also have a lot tougher time keeping consistency because of the transfer portal. And that's another thing. You bring a coach in, and if it isn't Monty Lee and someone else, 2025 might be a little clunky because of transfer portals and time frames and timelines and everything. But that guy can get spun around real quick in year two because he has a whole season now. So it's a little different animal these days than what it used to be when it comes to all that. But it was just like, and I've heard this, and I get it logically, transfer portal's now open. You want to get a head coach in as fast as possible. You want to get the right person, but you want to do it as fast as possible, some people say, because the portal's open. You don't want to lose your guys, and you don't want to lose a chance of bringing other guys. I keep saying, obviously, you don't want this to drag out for months, but you want to get the right guy. That's the most important thing here, is getting the right hire. And so far, no one's left. Now, I was reading one person speculated that maybe that gives you the thought that could Monty Lee be the guy because no one's left yet? Or could the players just sit around and they're waiting to see who the guy is going to be before they make a decision? I feel like that's what it is myself. They just want to sit back and see who the next head coach will be, and then they'll make a choice if they want to go in the portal or not. So, all right, that's John Whittle talking about Monty Lee. Very interesting candidacy for the head coaching gig at South Carolina. We got some more John Whittle we want to get into as well. We're going to also pop to our text of the hour, or Texas of the hour, at 803-404-6100 as our Firehouse Subtext the Hour we do on the show three times a day. We got that coming up. Also, we'll look at our Twitter X poll that we just popped up. Our final candidate poll, our candidate bracket, so to speak. 10 candidates, 3 days we've been doing this. And the winners will go up in our final poll tomorrow. So you can give us your thoughts, and then we'll fire up the final results on Monday. That's where we're going with that. So we're going to get to that next as well. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, we're hanging out here doing the halftime show, rolling up until 3. Then Jay and Elijah will take over with the post-game show right here on The Game. Man, so much to get to, so little time. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. We are cooking up until 3 here on the game. All right, time for our Firehouse subtext of the hour. This is from our buddy Stephen Blythewood. He says, again, hiring Monty Lee because the players want him and recruits want him is short-sighted and, in my opinion, a mistake. If you truly think he's your guy, then okay. And also, Steve says, reminder, these are the same players that were 13 and 17 in conference. I think 2 good points as well. You hire anybody you're hiring. You hire him because he's the right guy. He's the guy that's going to get you back to who you used to be. That's why you hire that person. Not for any other reason. We've gone over this all week long. It's like, don't hire them because they're just solely from South Carolina, or they went to South Carolina, or they have a vacation home in South Carolina, or they love south of the border. Don't hire them for any of those reasons. Don't hire them because, just because they worked with Ray Tanner, or they've been here in some way, shape, or form on a coaching staff, or played here, or whatever. That all might be true to the person you hire, but the reason you hire them is not for those reasons, because they're the person that's going to get you back to where you were. It's very simple. Ray Tanner was hired as a baseball coach from NC State. Born in North Carolina, raised in North Carolina, played at NC State, assistant at NC State, head coach at NC State. Zero tie to South Carolina. He was hired because he was the best guy for the gig. That's what you need to do here. Get the best person for the job. Appreciate that text, Steve. Thank you very much for those thoughts. Also, we're doing our Twitter X poll, our final candidate poll, which I find quite interesting. And we're going to give you yesterday's because it was pretty wild. All right, today's right now, day 3, the final day of the coaching candidate bracket. Chris Lemonis from Mississippi State, Josh Jordan, LSU assistant. Of course, Landon Powell, who has been talked about a ton here, former Gamecock, doing a great job in Division II as a head coach. Skylar Meade, former pitching coach for Mark Kingston, who has done a really nice job at Troy. A lot of people look at him as a young up-and-comer. Right now, Chris Lemonis leads away at 44% of the vote. Landon Powell second at 29% of the vote. Skylar Meade, 16% of the vote. Josh Jordan at 12% of the vote. Already about 150 votes. And we still have 23 hours left, so feel free to get in. Feel free. Yesterday's was wild. And, of course, my phone's stuck for some reason. Okay. Yesterday's was crazy. Chris Pollard, the Duke head coach, Josh Elander, the Tennessee assistant, the right-hand man with the Volunteers, both ended up tied at 38% of the vote. If you get into, the decimal points, Ellender wins on decimal points, but they're both really at 38%. So we're going to move Pollard and Ellender both into the final bracket tomorrow, along with Cliff Godwin from East Carolina, who won day 1's Twitter poll. Those 3 and the winner of today will go into the final Twitter poll. So we appreciate you jumping in there, and we've already gotten, again, a good amount of votes so far, 152, and we just started the poll less than an hour ago. So, again, we appreciate you jumping in, voting, giving your thoughts, because, again, that is important to us, believe it or not. It is. All right, back to John Whittle real fast, Ed Bird. Let's grab a couple more thoughts from the Big Spurs, John Whittle, on this whole search. John, of course, on with Jay and Elijah on the postgame show yesterday. Let's get to the one cut talking about Walter and Pollard. Of course, Tom Walter at Wake Forest, who went to Omaha last year. Underachieved this year, to be fair. They were preseason number 1 in the country, didn't get out of the regional. Walter and Pollard at Duke, and what Pollard's done at Duke, Chris Pollard's done at Duke is unbelievable. Pollard took the gig. They hadn't been to the NCAAs in 55 years. Now, since Chris Pollard has been at Duke, they have been to the Supers, I believe it's 3 times. So here's John Whittle talking about what a Walter or a Pollard would cost South Carolina.
Yeah, certainly reasonable candidates, both from a financial standpoint and a resume standpoint. Like, both of those guys have now. I will say that both of those guys have just redone contracts, and both of them are going to take some financial commitment. Like, it's going to take 7 figures worth of buyout to to make some things happen. But you might be able to finagle some finances and make those things work. So, if those are the guys, if one of those guys is who Ray Tanner wants to go with, I do think that they can make that happen financially. So I don't think that money is prohibitive on either one of those guys particularly, but it's not those guys aren't easy slam dunks either. I mean, they'll have to get a little creative and make some things work out.
It feels like the buyout's the thing, right? I mean, you think, because both guys between, I think, $1.2 million and $1.5 million, you get either one of them. That's my guess. But the buyout's a thing. I mean, Walter's buyout is 7 figures, and Pollard, it's tough to get Pollards because, again, private school, just like Wake. But the rumors and the scuttlebutt is they're both 7-figure buyouts. And like John said, can you get creative? You have to get creative to pay that off. But the salary in itself is in that price range we've been talking about all along. That's going to take. Both guys, I think, listen. Both guys, you'll hit a ceiling at the commitment to baseball at Duke and Wake Forest. And again, both guys have done great work building those programs. And again, Pollard, the only box Pollard doesn't check for you is he hasn't yet gotten to Omaha, but he has gotten to the Supers, like I said, multiple times, and has built a heck of a program. And Walter, trip to the College World Series last year for Wake Forest. Those are guys you would have high on your list. Like I said, I started this whole thing myself saying, hey, you want a guy that's been to Omaha. In a perfect world, you get a guy that's been there. He can be, it's been there, done that. He knows his way around Omaha. Everybody knows him in Omaha. He walks down the road. They go, hey, Coach, good to see you again. How's it going? That's the perfect world guy. The second level guy would be a Pollard or a Godwin at East Carolina, guys who have done great work and have gotten to Supers more than once. I think both have been 3 times. And they've gotten there at schools that don't have the resources or the passion in the community for baseball like here at South Carolina. So your thought is, okay, those guys haven't made it yet to Omaha, but they've been one step away, and you give them the resources of a South Carolina and the community backing that South Carolina gives baseball. And that might be what those guys need to take the next step to Omaha. So there's John Whittle on that. Also, real quick, Ed Burt, no, we don't have time. We don't have time. We'll get to John's thoughts on time frame coming up here on the show, because John Whittle does discuss the time frame on this hire he did with Jay and Elijah yesterday. We'll get to that one. But some good stuff from John Whittle we want to pass along to you this hour about the head coaching search at South Carolina. Also want to give you the Twitter poll. Again, just started it less than an hour ago, so feel free to vote and give your comment on who you'd like to see be the next head coach at South Carolina with the candidates we put in there. And then we'll take all the winners will go into the big, gigantic Twitter X poll for tomorrow. All right, football with some baseball in the 1 o'clock hour. Coming up, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. We go till 3 here on the game. Halftime show, Terry Ford and Ed Bird as we run till 3. Then post-game show with Jay and Elijah here on the Game in Columbia, Florence, Myrtle Beach, 107.5 The Game app, and the Game TV. Before we get to football, like we always do in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Real quick, I was kind of like trolling through the News and Observer in the Triangle area because we were talking about Chris Pollard getting a recent contract extension. It was last year after the Miami Hurricanes sniffed around Pollard for their head coaching vacancy. Pollard got a new deal, which obviously Duke's a private school. You're not seeing the numbers, in the public because they don't have to release it. The other thing that was talked about, though, in the contract extension was also more support for the baseball program. Nina King, the AD, and Pollard, when announcing the contract extension, one part of this about the, commitment to baseball. As for the on-campus improvements around Jack Combs Field that will be coming for Duke baseball, both Pollard and King remain vague about what's coming. Quote, we'll continue to invest in the quality of the student-athlete experience, which includes facilities and staffing, said King, to ensure that Duke student-athletes have the opportunity to compete at the highest level, both academically and athletically. Pollard said we want to grow the things that matter to the student-athletes experience. There's a lot that goes into that. The project will undoubtedly be phased. There's a lot still to sort out. The biggest thing that I was hopeful for was assurances that we would get it going sooner rather than later with investments in things at Coombs that are going to impact the day-to-day development of our players. So, vague in what they're talking about in the timeline and things of that nature. But when Pollard inked his contract extension at the end of last year, those are things that were promised to be. Now, are they in writing? Did they put that in the contract? I don't know. If they did, you might hear about that in that piece saying in the contract extension was assurances that this will be done, that'll be done. A lot of times they don't do that because, again, you can't guarantee something. You need funding, you need money. If you start guaranteeing things, like if your mouth is writing checks that your checking account can't cash, you're in trouble. But however that went, was that just a handshake between King and Pollard that we are going to upgrade the facilities and we're going to invest more heavily in Duke baseball? I don't know. But that's what was from the News and Observer. And we'll continue our conversation, obviously, about the baseball coaching search here on the Game. But right now it's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Couple things. First of all, the college football playoff TV schedule is out. A deep dive in this thing, I don't think there's one. It's just cool that the first round is going to be on campuses. So you get a home field advantage in the first round. Then once you go to the quarters, you got December 31st, the Fiesta is a 7:30 kickoff. Then you get to January 1, New Year's Day, and you got kickoffs all day long, man. 3 games, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 8:45. So it feels just like, it always has on New Year's Day. And you couldn't have fit, you didn't want to play one of these like at 3:30 in the afternoon or 3 o'clock in the afternoon on New Year's Day. You want prime time, right? Because, again, TV runs everything. So New Year's Eve, you get the first quarterfinal, the Fiesta. Now, we've seen in the past college football playoff on New Year's Eve. Doesn't go well. But we'll see how this one fares in the new world now of the college football playoff. Then when you get to the semis are on different days, again, because you want them in prime time. January 9th, 7:30 p.m., January 10th, 7:30 p.m. Now, I think ESPN, they've handed off the 2 first-round games on January 21st, the noon and 4 o'clock kickoffs to TNT. Why? Because the NFL's playing in that time window. And you're not going to get numbers. Not like if you were the only game in town. The NFL will whoop you. That's just reality. Nothing against college football. The NFL whips everybody. How about the NFL a few years ago said Christmas? That's a good idea. Hey, the NBA's on Christmas, NFL. Yeah, whatever. So the NFL has basically stepped on the face of the NBA at Christmas. And, the NFL did have conversations about this with the college football playoff folks, but this is the way it's going, and the NFL is breaking out. I think it's Kansas City and Houston, which is Patrick Mahomes and C.J. Stroud, and then you get the best rivalry in the NFL for years, Ravens and Steelers. That's what the NFL is going to cook on December 21st against the college football playoff. So that's why TNT's getting them. And those ratings will be bigger for TNT than their typical rerun of some show from the 90s like Charmed. No offense against Charmed, but Charmed reruns, college football playoff. You just won't get the typical ratings because the NFL will be going. Then after the semis, the semis will be on January 9th and 10th, like we said, prime time, and then the championship game on January 20th at 7:30, which I think is a fine time for a college football playoff championship game. I don't get as crazy as other people about start times. Like, should the NCAA basketball championship game start earlier than, 9:15 or 9:20? Yeah, really should. It's a Monday night. Not only is it a school night, it's a work night. You got to get up the next day. Kids get up the next day. Just start it earlier. That'd be me. But they don't. But I watch it. I don't get mad. I haven't gotten to the point yet where I've fallen asleep during the NCAA championship game. Unless it's a total, snoozer. But I usually can make it. But, yeah, I wish it would start earlier. And there are some games that you go, World Series at times has been started at clunky start times. You're like, man, could you start that a little earlier, please? Because you're going to go 4 hours, man. I'm not as young as I used to be. So start times, I don't get, flipped out over things. The January 1 late game is going to be 8:45. Okay. I'll handle the final quarterfinal at 8:45, the Sugar Bowl. Won't lose my mind there. That's the start times for the college football playoff. Now, the first 12-team version coming up. Stuart Mandel had some interesting stuff in his mailbag talking college football. A couple things that I saw that kind of caught my eye. One, there was a question to Stuart. What team in the preseason top 10 do you see falling out of the preseason top 10? And a lot of folks in their way too early preseason top 10s have Michigan. And that's the first team that came to my mind. That's who Stewart had, and that could be the team that falls out. First of all, you have a new head coach. Coach Kakis has gone to the NFL. That's number one. Sherrod Moore, hey, good luck. Hope it works well, but you don't know what Moore is going to be as a head coach. You lost a bunch of talent. Break in another quarterback. It looks like, and the Pickens doesn't really make you all tingly. And then the other thing with Michigan is the schedule. Michigan's had a pretty cupcake schedule here lately, like early season, non-conference. And look, the Big Ten's top-heavy. We all know that. Basically, you have to beat Michigan State. You have to beat Ohio State. It's because Penn State, they're good, but they're not on your level. Michigan State every now and then is, but for the most part, you just got to worry about that game against that school down south. This year, though, the Michigan schedule with a first-year head coach, starting a new quarterback, a bunch of other pieces that you have to put in because of losses to the NFL draft. You have Texas and Ann Arbor. You have Washington in Seattle. Oregon is in Ann Arbor. But this year you're traveling to Columbus. Those are 4 difficult games, 2 road, 2 home. So it's not a patsy schedule like it's been lately for Michigan. And again, you got all those other things going on as well. So we'll see, but I can see Michigan being a 3-loss team. Falling out of the top 10, wouldn't be surprising. Jim Harbaugh, we forget. Look, all the stuff about Jim Harbaugh always gets in the way of one thing. Jim Harbaugh is a fantastic football coach. Forget the khakis and the weird things he says and some of the goofball stuff and all the fights with the NCAA and all the other stuff that's been going on. recording stuff with some dude in the stands. Jim Harbaugh is a phenomenal football coach. He won at the University of San Diego. His quarterback's Josh Johnson, who's played for every NFL team. He's won everywhere. Coached the 49ers to a Super Bowl. People forget the mess the 49ers were when Jim Harbaugh showed up. They were a wreck. What was Stanford when Jim Harbaugh got there? Michigan. Been years since Michigan's a name brand in college football, but it's been a while since they were truly national championship contender relevant. Look what Jim Harbaugh's done. Guy just wins, man. You don't have to like him. You think his family and him were a bunch of football kooks, that's fine. But I'd hire Jim Harbaugh in a heartbeat. What's Michigan going to be now that Harbaugh's gone? We're going to see. Or do they go back to being, a good program that really isn't a level 1 program competing for championships, but, they're good? Or are they going to stay on the level that Jim Harbaugh has put them on? I feel like they fall back. I just do. No offense to Sherrod Moore. I just think people are undervaluing just how good of a football coach Jim Harbaugh is. So that's number one in this post from Stuart Mandel. The other thing I thought was very interesting with Stuart is talking about the College Football Hall of Fame. We glossed over this yesterday about, the Nick Saban obviously is nominated, Urban Meyer nominated, and they're no-brainer first ballot guys. What we didn't get to was the criteria that the National Football Foundation sets up to be a head coach eligible for the Hall of Fame. A guy has to have been a head coach for 10 years and have a 600 career winning percentage. So you look at this. Mike Leach had a 596 winning percentage. Despite the fact that Mike Leach won in Lubbock, Texas, Mike Leach won in Pullman, Washington, and was winning in Starkville, Mississippi. Mike Leach, a 596 winning percentage, not eligible. That's ridiculous. Plus the offensive innovator that Mike Leach was. Here's another good one for you. Pete Carroll, coached 9 seasons at Southern Cal. Forget the fact that he had an 833 winning percentage and was unbelievable. 7 straight top 5 teams. Won a couple of national championships. Would be looked at as one of the best head coaches of his generation. He only coached 9 years. That's it. Stewart had a great joke in his column. He says, Pete Carroll could show up, coach 1 year at Akron, go 1-11, immediately step down, and be eligible for the College Football Hall of Fame and be a first ballot guy. Absolutely. So, they got to do something about that. I get you going to have some kind of criteria, but common sense and logic have to step in there, right? Sometimes common sense and logic are always left out of the room. But very interesting there from Stuart Mandel. All right, it's football in the 1 o'clock hour. Sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. South Carolina was chasing a 5-star linebacker. If you don't know by now, we'll tell you how that chase ended. Also, we'll continue to look at the college football quarterback tiers from ESPN. We'll look at the SEC teams. Where are their quarterback rooms in the pecking order nationally? It is the halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird's here. We're cooking this baby up until 3 on the game. All right, when you want to do stuff to your home, let's say you want to get all new appliances for the kitchen. Maybe you want a new bathroom, tub, new shower. Maybe you just want new lighting, new fixtures. I want to deal with the plumbing situation. You can talk on the phone to somebody and you can say, I want this and that, and da-da-da-da-da. But what's better is to come into a showroom, sit down, have a conversation with a crew of people who have over 70 years of experience in this field. Have them walk you around the showroom and give you a look at what they can do. The appliances or the tubs and the sinks they have to offer, the showers. Sit down and let them know your budget and what they can do for you to make your vision come to life. Come in and sit down with these folks at the Nest. 803-978-2025. Call, make the appointment, and see what the experienced folks at the Nest can do for you to make your vision come true at your budget. Again, 803-978-2025. The Nest, 1331 Gadsden Street in the Vista. Call the Nest. Bring your home to life. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Ned Bird, and his Werther candy. You know, maybe if you like Werther's, just stop here. Stop here. You know, we're here on Gervais, Bank of America building, first floor. You know, Ed's got bags of this stuff. Start passing them out to listeners. I'm sure Ed would be down with that. Was that the thumb you gave me or the other finger? Just now. So we're hanging out till 3. Football in the 1 o'clock hour. We'll get back to our baseball conversation. We spent the whole first hour digging into the latest on the South Carolina baseball search, the head coaching search. Listen to a lot of stuff, a lot of comments from John Whittle from the Big Spur when he was on with Jay and Elijah yesterday on the postgame show. And real quick, we'll get you caught up before we move back to football. Our Twitter X poll, our final candidate Twitter X poll of this week. Then we're going to take all the winners from the first 3 and put them into a poll tomorrow. Our finalist poll. Right now, our coaching bracket candidate deal for today is Chris Lemonis, Mississippi State, been to Omaha twice. Josh Jordan, LSU assistant, never been a head coach. Of course, Landon Powell, former Gamecock, who has tore it up in Division II, and Skylar Meade, former pitching coach under Mark Kingston, who's done some nice work after a few years at Troy, looked at as a real up-and-comer in the coaching world. Right now, Chris Lemonis, 42% leads away. Landon Powell at 31%. Skylar Meade at 15%. Josh Jordan at 13%. We've got almost 200 votes in. About an hour and a half in the poll. Feel free to jump in. Again, it's our Twitter X poll at 1075 The Game. All right, spinning back to football. The quarterback tiers that ESPN put up, quite interesting. A bunch of tiers done by David Hale, ESPN.com. We went over, just kind of skimming over it yesterday, and we're just going to go through the SEC, try to get through as much as we can today. As you know, Tier 14 is where the South Carolina quarterback room, because this is my quarterback room, not just the starter, but also the backup. In some cases, the third stringer, if he's a third stringer who's like a former big-time recruit. And Tier 14 was the devil that you know or devil that you don't know. Basically, you bring in Robbie Ashford, who has started in the SEC at Auburn to mixed results. He's at South Carolina, but the guy you really want to start is Lenore Sellers. Like Robbie Ashford, you could do worse, but you could do better. And without saying it out loud, you'd prefer to have Lenore Sellers as your starter than Robbie Ashford, unless Robbie Ashford makes huge leaps as a thrower. Because again, Robbie Ashford can run all over the place, makes plays with his legs almost every game. Problem is, when Robbie Ashford drops back to pass, there's issues. So, he's a guy, it's a mixed bag. So that's Tier 14 is where South Carolina is with Lenore Sellers and Robbie Ashford. Alabama's Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson was in Tier 1 along with Georgia's Carson Beck, Jaden Rashada, Gunnar Stockton, and Texas' Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. Now, in the what you need to know section, some of this is interesting. Milroe led the country with 26 scrambles for first downs. And that's the thing with Jalen Milroe, his legs. He makes plays with his legs. And he's a good deep thrower. Like we said yesterday, passing in that intermediate and shorter window is where Milroe's had consistency issues. But here's another interesting stat. No quarterback had a higher percentage of his dropbacks come versus zone than Milroe. And Milroe was good against the zone. Struggled more against man coverage. Now, you would think sometimes with zone, you could maybe disguise and fool a guy more. A guy who is, hasn't started a lot, but Milroe was better against zone than man. So basically, you might see more man coverage against Alabama this year. Carson Beck versus ranked opponents at game time had a QBR of 92. That's really good. Completed 74% of his passes, 13 TDs, only 2 interceptions, over 10 yards an attempt. That's money against really good teams. We're going to give you the opposite of that coming up in a minute. Quinn Ewers, when Texas was trailing, Ewers was phenomenal. 73% of his passes he completed, 5 touchdowns, an interception, over 10 yards an attempt. 15% of his throws went for at least 20 yards in those situations. Wow. Again, Ewers made a huge improvement leap from his first year as a starter. Now you get to Tier 3. That's where you get 2 other SEC quarterbacks. Missouri's Brady Cook, Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. Now, things you need to know about these guys. And I'm going to throw in one from a non-SEC perception I think is interesting. But let's look at Brady Cook. Since week 11 of 2022, Brady Cook has been really good. Hit 65% of his throws, averaging almost 8 yards per drop back. His TD interception rate is almost 5-1. I mean, that's in rare air. That is really, that's with guys like Jaden Daniels from LSU, Bo Nix of Oregon, Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma, Caleb Williams of Southern Cal. Brady Cook's been that good, and that's one of the reasons why Missouri's taken off. Make no mistake, we can talk about all the other things about Mizzou. Brady Cook elevating his play as the trigger man has been phenomenal. And one of the reasons why Missouri became a double-digit win team last year. All right, the last one to get to here, Jackson Dart. And this is one of the question marks about Ole Miss. Against Georgia and Alabama last year, Jackson Dart only completed 58% of his throws. Failed to throw a touchdown, had 2 interceptions. Against everyone else, 66% of his passes completed, over 9 yards an attempt, 23 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. Against the 2 big dogs in the SEC, Jackson Dart struggled. That's where Ole Miss has to take the next step. When you're playing upper-level competition, Jackson Dart has to be money. Dude has to bring it. You can't win despite your quarterback in those kind of games. You just can't. And that's one of my things about Jackson Dart. Yeah, I mean, there are things about him you love, but there are some question marks, and here's one of them. How he played against the upper-level teams last year. The other one I want to get to, it's Will Howard, quarterback at Ohio State, who was in this Tier 3 as well. Percentage of throws to wide-open receivers beyond the line of scrimmage last year. Will Howard will be the starter at Ohio State, was 112th out of 126 qualified quarterbacks. That's percentage of throws to wide-open receivers beyond the line of scrimmage. Only 12.5%. That should improve at Ohio State with that receiving core. Ohio State, by the way, their quarterbacks in the same time frame averaged 25%. Double what Will Howard saw at Kansas State. All right, we'll get back. We didn't have time to get to a little recruiting news. South Carolina chasing a 5-star linebacker. We'll tell you how it turned out if you haven't heard. That's coming up next. Halftime show. Terry Ford and Ed Bird. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors, right here on The Game. Football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors, here on the Halftime Show on the Game. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging. Of course, Tyler filling in for Gunner, who's off on a cruise to the Bahamas. And, we expect Bill back Wednesday. But, hey, weird things happen when you leave the country. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Bill Gunner version of the movie Midnight Express. If you've ever seen it, you know what I'm saying. All of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute. I didn't do anything. What am I doing here? But anyway, Gunner, hopefully be back on Wednesday. So we shall see. But Tyler filling in for Bill right now, so we're just hanging here flying solo with Ed Bird punching the buttons for us. Again, football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. We will circle back to our baseball conversation, top of the hour, about the South Carolina baseball coaching opening. Heard a lot of good thoughts from John Whittle in the first hour of the show, from when John was on with Jay and Elijah on the postgame show. Ryan McGee also on the postgame show yesterday. Ryan McGee from ESPN gave his thoughts on the coaching search for the Gamecocks, also the SEC baseball landscape, a couple other things. We'll get those Ryan McGee comments for you in case you missed them in our What's Trending at 2 section at the top of the 2 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. All right, so South Carolina was in a fight with Georgia over 4-star, 5-star, depending on what you want to look at the star ranking, linebacker Zayden Walker. 15th overall prospect in ESPN's top 300, number 2 outside linebacker. Miami was on this list as well, but a lot of folks thought it was between Georgia and South Carolina for Walker. South Carolina did a great job of recruiting Walker. I mean, Georgia kid. And yesterday, Walker announced he is going to go to the University of Georgia, verbally committed. Again, he visited South Carolina unofficially. He's been around Columbia, but decided to stay home and play for Georgia. Well, he verbaled. Is it over? Of course not. It's never over till they sign the letter of intent, right? And even anymore, it's not even over then. But Zayden Walker verbals to the University of Georgia. South Carolina fought to the bitter end on Zayden Walker. All right, Steve Sarkisian. It's talking season, right? Steve Sarkisian talking here recently about the move from the Big 12 to the SEC for Texas football. Again, Texas football had their best season in a long time under Sark last year. Got to the college football playoff, got down big to UW early, fought back, almost pulled that thing out at the end against the Huskies. Fell short in the college football playoff semifinal, though. Here's what Steve Sarkisian says. What do the Longhorns have to change to be competitive in the SEC?
So it was interesting. When I took the job and I was meeting with Chris Delcani and Jay Hartzell, our president, and what is needed and how are you going to build it? And you talk about your plan. And I said we're going to have to build a roster that can compete and ultimately beat Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State, Notre Dame, because those are the perennial teams that are in those Final Four games. And that's the goal at Texas, is to go win the national championship. So when they exposed it to me that we were going to the SEC, they said, what needs to change? I said, nothing, because that's what we were already building for anyway, right? And having the size and the depth at the line of scrimmage is critical in the SEC, as you guys well know. You got to have speed and playmaking ability on the perimeter, and at any level, you've got to have quarterback play if you're going to try to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, Sark makes sense. His goal was to compete on the highest level at Texas, which it should be your goal at Texas. I mean, you print your own money. You got gobs of dough. The facilities are fantastic. You got crazy rabid fan base through the state that loves Texas football. You should be on level one. The fact you haven't been is stunning how inept you've been, right? So, yes, you should be looking to compete with Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and the big dogs of college football. So from that perspective, Sark's mission statement when he was hired, you don't have to change anything because that's what you were looking to do anyway. Totally understand that. And you do. I mean, the line of scrimmage is so vital. You know, you have to have good quarterback play to win now. You can't win despite your quarterback. Eventually, your quarterback's got to make plays. You can't escape it. You can't run from it. Stetson Bennett, when Georgia beat Alabama for the national championship, Stetson Bennett was outplayed for 3 quarters by that Bama quarterback. Whatever happened to that guy? But fourth quarter, when Alabama made that a game and the game was on the line, Stetson Bennett made plays at the quarterback position in that fourth quarter that led Georgia to that victory. Eventually, your quarterback has to help you win games today. Game manager, you can be that to a point, but there is going to be, in every big game, there's going to be a time you as the quarterback, you got to be a difference maker. But the line of scrimmage, just, if you can't win the line of scrimmage in the SEC, forget it. We saw that last year with South Carolina. You had Spencer Rattler at quarterback. You had Xavier Legette, first-round pick at wide receiver. Interesting passing offense that at times was very productive and explosive. But your offensive line was a mess. And it, at times, just totally shut down your offense. It just did. You couldn't do anything. Couldn't run it. You didn't have time to throw it. You got to win the line of scrimmage in the SEC. What's one of the things that changed when the Gamecocks got better in November on the defensive side of the ball? Up front, they started winning or holding their own. That was the difference. Got to win the line of scrimmage, man. You just do. So there's Stark's comments. I thought they were quite interesting. Steve Sarkisian talking about what they're doing at Texas. Look, Oklahoma feels the same way. Oklahoma's like, look, our goal is to compete on a championship level when we're in the Big 12. That's where we're at. Now, is Brent Venables the guy that's going to keep you competing at a high level? I don't know yet. Year 1 with Venables was very underwhelming. Year 2, you won double-digit games, but, you know, you kind of stubbed your toe a couple times, and it kept you out of competing for the college football playoff. Brent Venables this year, offensive line has to get rebuilt. You have a young quarterback in Jackson Arnold, but you should always have a gigantic talent pipeline that's just shooting high-level dudes onto the field at Norman. You know, they jump out of the Sooner schooner. That's just who you are at Oklahoma. Venables, we'll see where it goes, but I think there's still the jury's out / question mark on Brent Venables. Is he a high-level head coach that can, you know, do what needs to be done in Norman, Oklahoma? We don't know yet. But these are the folks you're bringing in the SEC. You know, they want to be on level 1 with the Alabamas and the Georgias, and a decent amount of time the LSUs. They want to be up there. They don't want to be on level 2 where, you jump in a couple of years, you jump back out, you jump in, you jump back out. They want to be consistently level 1 programs. Oklahoma, you got a lot more confidence in than Texas because, quite frankly, Texas hasn't done it in forever until last year. The whole Texas is back, well, we'll see. We'll see. Just like the whole, Venables won double-digit games, Oklahoma's on the right track like usual. Well, we'll see. We'll see. All right, football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. Terry Ford, glad you could be hanging. We'll get a Firehouse sub text of the hour. Also, take a look at our Twitter X poll, talking about the Carolina baseball coach vacancy. We'll get into all that in our next segment. We are hanging here up until 3. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, halftime show in the game. All right, time for our Firehouse Sub text of the hour, 803-446-100. Again, a lot of texting about the baseball search at South Carolina. And we were, in the first hour, we just, nothing but USC baseball talk. John Whittle from Big Spur, we took some of his comments from his visit on the postgame show yesterday with Jay and Elijah here on the game. And we talked a lot about Monty Lee and the polarizing candidacy of Monty Lee for this gig. There are folks in this fan base who would love to have Monty Lee and folks in this fan base who don't want Monty Lee to be the next head coach of South Carolina. Anonymous texter says, do we lose Monty Lee if we don't hire him as the head coach? I know a lot of the pitchers in particular really like him. I want him to stay, so that's a consideration. I think if Monty Lee's not the head coach, he probably leaves. Like, there's been a lot of talk Monty Lee to the Citadel. And that could happen if Monty Lee's not named head coach of South Carolina. Monty Lee might take the Citadel job. Now, could Monty Lee stay on a staff with, a new head coach? I mean, it could happen. New head coach might see the value of Monty Lee. Monty Lee's a good baseball man. Whether you think he should be the next head coach or not, guy knows baseball. And, maybe the new head coach would want to keep Monty around. He sees the positives of a Monty Lee on your staff. Like when Monty Lee was brought back here 2 years ago. So that's, you can't say he wouldn't stay, but, that could be a possibility if he doesn't move on. Like I say, take the Citadel head coaching job. Appreciate the text like always, 803-446-100, our Firehouse Sub text of the hour. Speaking of the baseball job, our Twitter poll, it's getting interesting. This is Coaching Candidate Bracket Day 3. Right now, our finalist, Cliff Godwin won the first bracket. Monty Lee was second in that one. Cliff Godwin of East Carolina won the first day. Second day, we had a tie. Chris Pollard of Duke and Josh Elander, the Tennessee assistant head coach and recruiting coordinator, both at 38%. So they'll both go to the finals tomorrow. So tomorrow's final Twitter poll with candidates will have Chris Pollard, Josh Elander, Cliff Godwin, and today's winner. Now today we have Chris Lemonis of Mississippi State, Josh Jordan, LSU assistant, former Gamecock and Division II head coach Landon Powell, and former Gamecock pitching coach and Troy head coach Skylar Meade. Right now, Chris Lemonis is leading 41%. Landon Powell's at 32%, but Landon Powell is slowly closing the margin. It's now under 10%. Skylar Meade's a distant third at 15%. Josh Jordan from LSU at 12%. We still have 22 hours left in this baby. We've already got over 200 votes. So feel free to jump in there, make your voice heard. We do appreciate it. All right, now back to football here in the 1 o'clock hour. Pro Football Talk reporting at Indianapolis Colts practice on Thursday. Reporters shared a video of quarterback Anthony Richardson taking snaps during team drills, then handing the ball off or throwing it with his left hand. Now, of course, Richardson's right-handed, and he's coming off right shoulder surgery. So, look, it's not, oh, my God, what's he doing? Oh, my God, this is a big red flag, because he's coming back. And the Colts and Anthony Richardson might think it's just smart for him to really slow play, putting a lot of wear and tear on his surgically repaired shoulder in, I don't know, June? So that would make sense. And here's what Richardson said. I'm good, just a little soreness. I've been dealing with soreness since I started throwing, just my shoulder. It's hard to listen to the trainers sometimes, like you got to sit out for a day. I don't want to sit out, but it's part of the healthy journey. Head coach Shane Steichen joined Richardson in downplaying the severity of the issue, said the quarterback could be able to play if the Colts are scheduled for a game this weekend. What are you going to say? You're going to get in front of the media, oh, man, my shoulder's killing me. Jeez. I'm dying. I can't even hold a fork. I don't know who did this surgery. Were they drunk? I mean, of course you can't do that. You got to say everything's good. It's just a little sore. Head coach got to say the same thing. Because, again, you're not playing for real, July, August. You got 3 months. A long time until you take a snap in anger and play football. But I'll say this. Last time I checked, and I'm no anatomy expert, I failed that class like 6 times in college. The right shoulder is kind of important when you throw right-handed. So we'll see where it goes. And look, Anthony Richardson he was not very accurate to begin with a healthy right shoulder. I mean, Anthony Richardson, he had a rocket launcher for an arm, but a lot of times nobody knew where it was going, not even Anthony. So if this is a lingering issue, how does that affect Anthony Richardson moving forward throwing the football? I don't think it's, again, everybody should get all concerned if you're an Indy Colt or an Anthony Richardson fan, but it's something to keep your eye on. Again, shoulder surgery, sometimes everything comes back fine, but depending on the injury and things of that nature, sometimes guys just aren't the same after the surgery. But it's way too early to get into all that for Anthony Richardson. Speaking of him, I saw something that kind of made me chuckle, or heard something. A national pundit putting his list together, and it's list season, of breakout quarterbacks for 2024, and he put Anthony Richardson on his list, saying, you see what he did his rookie year. Okay. First of all, he didn't play a lot. And yeah, he had a few plays that were SportsCenter highlights, but he also had a bunch of plays that made you go, wow, this dude's got a lot of development left. I wouldn't really put him in for a breakout guy. I said when Anthony Richardson was drafted, Anthony Richardson is a huge swing by the Indianapolis Colts, because Richardson hits 2 major buckets that are ginormous, don't draft that guy lists. One is how inaccurate he was at Florida, and 2, how few starts he had at Florida. There's a lot of bust first-round quarterbacks that hit one of those 2 buckets. Anthony's in both. Indy is banking on the incredible athleticism of Richardson, his playmaking ability in college, despite his issues, and the fact that they can develop him into a consistent NFL thrower from the pocket. Because, look, you can run around all day. Eventually, you got to drop back in that pocket 3, 5, 7 steps, or take a shotgun snap and be in that pocket. Scan the defense, read the defense, make the correct, accurate throw in a really tight window. There's no escaping it. Lamar Jackson gets better as a player because he's gotten better at throwing from the pocket last year under Todd Monken. You got to be able to throw from the pocket. If you can't consistently throw the ball 10 to 12 yards downfield in the pocket, you're just not going to be a successful, consistent franchise-type quarterback. You're just not. So we'll see what happens with Anthony Richardson. All right, that's football in the 1 o'clock hour, sponsored by Atlantic Windows and Doors. What did Ryan McGee say about the South Carolina baseball coaching search on the postgame show yesterday with Jay and Elijah? We'll let you hear some of Ryan's thoughts next on what's trending at 2 on the halftime show on the game. Halftime show, Terry Ford, Ed Bird, rolling up until 3 on the game. Time for What's Trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. Ryan McGee was on the postgame show with Jay and Elijah yesterday. Re-rack some of the thoughts of Ryan McGee. We're going to start off like Cliff Godwin has been talked about as a legit candidate for the head coaching vacancy here for Gamecock baseball. And here is Ryan McGee, of course, ESPN's Ryan McGee, his thoughts on Cliff Godwin in East Carolina. Hit it, Ed.
Well, what I was going to say I was going to say that, Cliff's an East Carolina guy. He was, born and raised right around the corner from campus, and he loves that place. But, I think that South Carolina's best option is going to be a coach like that, or maybe look toward Louisville, or maybe look toward some other places that can't quite seem to get over the hump, right? They've got all the resources, they got the passionate fan base, they got all those things. But, if you're Godwin, you have to start asking, can we get there? Because the guy can coach baseball, and he can recruit. His team, I was up there earlier this year, that team is so loaded. And so the question is this as far as he can carry that bucket? And as much as he would love to get the Pirates to Omaha finally, maybe it's time to move to a place with the resources to do that. Now, I know Ole Miss has talked about that name. There's a lot of his name's attached to a lot of teams, a lot of games, a lot of teams, a lot of programs. But Chris Pollard, you mentioned, Tom Walter, Dan McDonald's, who I was thinking about at Louisville. So, maybe you go after a guy that's like, all right, I've taken this as far as I can take it. So why not take my chances in the SEC, which is the completely non-disputed best college baseball conference in the land, and also a place that's led by a baseball coach in Randy Tanner, and is willing to tap into the resource.
Yeah, I think Ryan makes a lot of good points there. Stuff we've talked about, and they're not just good points because we've talked about them, but I think there's good points in general about all these coaches. You have to take a step back and say, all right, have I taken this as far as I can? Is this as good as it gets? And if you truly think that you have kind of hit the ceiling, and the ceiling's not a bad place, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, the ceiling's awful. You're just saying, okay, is this as far as I can go at East Carolina? Is Louisville never going to give me the resources I truly need to make this baseball program consistently the winner that I had made it before the NIL and the transfer portal? Is this as good as it gets at Duke? And even with some promises of more investment in the baseball program, is it really going to be the investment I want or need to really get where I think we can go? Wake Forest, same thing. Is this as good as I can make it at Wake? Can I do any better? All those are fair and legit questions I think these guys have to ask themselves. Look, South Carolina is a step up. It's the SEC, best baseball conference in America, passionate fan base, dying to get back to the level that they once were. Resources, facilities, again, they might not be top like they were when they were first put together, but they're still a fine baseball job. South Carolina should be a top 10, top 15 baseball job. This program should be a top 10 program or a top 15 program. No reason it shouldn't be. That's what you would get if you come to Columbia. These guys have to sit back and say, okay, is my situation as good as it can get? And do you want to jump in? It's a pressure cooker. Look, I've been here 3 years. Again, I've talked to a lot of fans. You're expected to win big here. And if you don't, you're going to hear about it. Flat out, full stop. That's just the way it is. Do you want to take on that challenge? If you don't, then really, Ray Tanner wouldn't want you in the first place. You got to want to strap it up and jump into the fray because that's what you do here. But all these guys have to step back and take a look. Have I gone as far as I can? Do I want to compete on the highest of levels? Do I want to take on the job of getting South Carolina back to being one of the best programs in America? Do I want to go where I've got a better chance to win big? If so, I'm in. All right, Ryan McGee also talked about, speaking of Cliff Godwin, his thoughts, can Ray Tanner get Godwin to leave East Carolina? Because the talk is Cliff Godwin's not going to leave East Carolina. You just heard what Ryan said. He's an alum. He grew up right around the corner from the campus. His goal is always to get the Pirates to Omaha. But would Godwin leave for this opportunity, which, let's be fair, also includes getting paid more dough. Here is Ryan McGee on, could you pry Godwin out of Greenville, North Carolina?
Yeah, and Cliff knows that story. I mean, you know this. I mean, I said I grew up in Raleigh, and and Tanner and I talk about it all the time, about the fact that, I would sit in the grandstands and watch top 15 baseball teams when Tanner was an assistant coach and then when he was the head coach, and that was his school. And I didn't think there was any way he'd ever leave, but there has never been anyone that has enjoyed where he lives and the job that he has more than Ray Tanner has in Columbia, South Carolina. And so that you're exactly right. That's the story. And he is Tanner is still he is a demigod in the college baseball community. And so if he calls, you got to answer. And again, he you hear Godwin talk, you know who he sounds like? He sounds like Ray. Because Ray sounds like me, because we're all from down east. And so they definitely speak the language. And South Carolina is not a hard sell. It's just a matter of finding the person that the timing is right.
Yeah.
That's an interesting angle Ryan McGee just talked about. McGee's from North Carolina, talking about Ray again from North Carolina. Kind of speak the same language with Cliff Godwin. And we forget this because, look, you can love Coach Tanner as an AD. You cannot love Coach Tanner as an AD. But in the baseball community, Ray Tanner is a iconic figure. And if Ray Tanner calls you about his opening, you're going to take the call and you're going to talk to him. Now, you might not want to be interested in the gig. You might not want to go forward as a candidate, whatever the case, but you're going to take that call and have the conversation at least. Excellent point by Ryan McGee. All right, also, Ryan McGee, obviously ESPN's Ryan McGee, talking about a couple other candidates here. Tom Walter of Wake Forest, Chris Pollard at Duke. Here's Ryan McGee's thoughts on those two.
Yeah, and then that staff at Wake Forest I've spent time with over the years, and Tom Walters is an all-time baseball guy. I did a story for East 60 almost a decade ago about Tom Walters donating his kidney to a freshman outfielder on his team who the kid was dying, and they couldn't find a match within his family. And Tom Walter was like, well, let me take the test. And lo and behold, the head baseball coach gave his player, Kevin Jordan, a kidney, and they're still great friends to this day. The funniest part about that, sidebar, by the way, he literally called the NCAA and was like, can I do this? Is this an improper benefit? I don't care if it is. Yeah, I don't care if it is. I just want you to know. Yeah, but that's the guy Tom Walter is. Yeah, and so to see them turn the corner, and, I was there last year. I've been going to Omaha, on and off for 20 years. That's the best college baseball game I ever saw, was that Wake Forest LSU game a year ago. And I know Wake Forest fans are disappointed that they're no longer playing this year. But yeah, and then at Duke. And you guys know I grew up in the Raleigh area. Yeah. And so I would go to games at Duke, and, it would be 9 of us. Me, my dad, my brother, and the girlfriends, right? Maybe one scout sitting in the grandstand. This is back in the 80s and 90s. And so, yeah, to turn those two programs around, to me, it's hope for everyone else, because if you know how to acquire players, and Wake Forest and Duke have gotten really good at being on the receiving end of the transfer portal, and you're coached up well, and it's a great environment, yeah, you can turn it around. So it's hope for a South Carolina who, by the way, has all the tools and has all the facilities and has all the history that Duke and Wake Forest did not. And so the opportunity to turn around quickly in college baseball, I think, is still there.
Again, very interesting conversation. Now, Walter, the thing about the kidney, I read that too, and I was like, wow, I didn't know that story. And I love the sidebar where he called the NCAA, is this an impermissible benefit? How about kidneys? Do kidneys count? But you can't go wrong with Walter or Pollard. I'd rather have Walter, again, a guy that's been to Omaha. But if you go with Pollard or if you go with Godwin, two guys have been to the Super, like we said, I believe both have been 3 times. You're right on the cusp of getting to the College World Series, and maybe coming to a place like this with all that it has to offer for a baseball coach could be what helps you get to that next step. But make no mistake, the job that Walter and Pollard have done at their respective schools is just top drawer. One last cut from Ryan McGee real quick, Ed Bird. Let's go with cut 1. Ryan talking about SEC baseball, the landscape, and how hard it is to consistently win in the Southeastern Conference now.
Well, the problem is comparison, because, when Carolina baseball had it rolling, and of course I'm talking about the College World, all the College World Series appearances, and when Ray was coaching and all that, when they had it rolling, the reality was that the SEC was kind of in its formative stage when it comes to college baseball as to what it is now. I mean, listen, LSU was LSU, and other teams, Florida was Florida, but other teams would kind of get on a run. Arkansas might be good for a few years, then it go away. Texas A&M might be good for a couple of years, and then it would take time off. Now everyone's good. I mean, there's a possibility of an all ACC versus SEC College World Series because all the teams. Listen, Kentucky is phenomenal at baseball.
Yeah.
That's not a sentence I've ever uttered before. When Kentucky spent $30 million on a baseball stadium, we all thought they were nuts because they still have never been to Omaha. So the point is, it's a much more crowded field and a much more difficult comparison measuring stick, than it was. So not that long ago, making the tournament is a sign of turning things around. And, certainly that team got going a couple times this year and it looked like it was making the turn. But, when Tennessee and Kentucky and Arkansas and, everyone else, Florida and everyone else are moving on and you're not, then, that becomes difficult to swallow. And comparison is the thief of joy, and it also is the thief of jobs.
I mean, you think about it for a minute, just how crazy competitive this conference is. It's nuts. I mean, you had Ole Miss win a national championship a couple years ago, and what have they done since? Nada. Mississippi State, same thing. Finally got back to the NCAAs this year after having 2 awful seasons. It's tough. All of a sudden, Alabama is above average at baseball. Most teams in this conference are much more competitive than they used to be. It's just tough. I looked this up today, and I heard Tyler and Preston talking about it on the morning show. I believe 9 teams from the SEC have been to Omaha since South Carolina last went. It's tough league, not easy. And right now, South Carolina, for all that tradition and history of success, is sitting at that level 2. You want to get back to the level 1. But tough league. Good stuff from Ryan McGee on with Jay and Elijah on the postgame show yesterday. We'll come back. What's trending at 2 here on the game? We'll look at the big story nationally is, could Danny Hurley actually leave UConn and become the head coach of the Lakers? Huh? And why do NBA teams continue to try to hire college basketball coaches when the track record is so awful? And we'll get into that coming back. What's trending at 2, sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. We'll also hear from you at 803-404-6100 on the Love Chevy phone line or the Firehouse Hub text line. We're going up until 3. Oh, by the way, Jordan Kay from the State at 2:30 to talk about this coaching search in South Carolina. That also coming up here on the halftime show on the game. All right, still cooking with what's trending at 2 here on the game. Sponsored by Gamecock Traditions and Traditions Fine Jewelry. The big national story right now is Danny Hurley, head coach at UConn, back-to-back national champions, is going to be big time targeted by the LA Lakers to be their next coach. A massive long-term contract offer. Lakers have had preliminary contract talks with Hurley. Sides are planning to escalate the discussions in the coming days. Sources told ESPN. According to sources, also, Hurley's been at the forefront of the Lakers' search from the beginning of the process, which we didn't hear anything about till today when you got that Woj bomb from Adrian Wojnarowski on ESPN, the breaking news. Now, according to John Fanta, host of At Big East Shoot-Around and also works at Field of 68, he said that Dan Hurley met with his players at UConn this morning, informed them he's been in talks with the Lakers. A source tells Fox Sports. Hurley didn't want to hide the fact that this is for real. Huskies have a noon practice, and Hurley told his players it's business as usual for now. So there you go. And we'll see. Look, I think Danny Hurley, if they offer you a crazy, stupid, gigantic contract, you take it. Give it a shot. Look, the odds say it's not going to work. And we'll get to that in a minute. But if you're Danny Hurley, take the massive money, the long-term deal. If it doesn't, look, the Lakers, they just kicked Darvin Ham to the curb after 2 years. They haven't had a coach for, I think, over 2 seasons since some dude named Phil Jackson. The Lakers, despite the fact they have won a championship in the last 5 years, the bubble championship, which, again, it counts. This is a franchise that can't get out of its own way. There is no foundation of anything with the Lakers. And say what you want, because you say, but Tara, they've always had stars and superstars, and they're the Lakers. Yeah, but you know what? There was a foundation. Shaq and Kobe was a foundation. Yeah. Kobe and Gasol was a foundation. Magic and Worthy and Kareem, that was a foundation. Yeah. Now, yeah, you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, but Davis is only good when he feels like playing or he's healthy. Then he's phenomenal. But then, how much do you count on Anthony Davis? LeBron's going to be 40 for the love of God. And because they're paying so much money to Davis and LeBron, they've had to piece together a roster, and that's not the strength of the GM, Rob Pelinka. What is Rob Pelinka's strength? I don't know. It's just not an organization built with a real foundation. It's just not. And they're one of the pitches to Hurley is, we want you to come in here and build this thing like Oklahoma City or Minnesota or Milwaukee. Okay. Denver. I mean, the NBA landscape has changed to a point. You see the teams that win the title aren't teams just with superstars thrown against the wall together and, okay, go win a championship. Even Golden State, to be fair, had a foundation of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. And then they added Kevin Durant, and, of course, that team, the only thing that beat that team was injuries. So the Lakers, I guess we should give them props for saying, hey, look at what these other teams are doing. We'd like to do it. Well, let's see if you really have the stomach to do it, because you need some innards. You need some onions to go through the process. And I don't know if the Lakers have that because, again, it's L.A., it's Hollywood, it's stars sitting courtside. It's Jack Nicholson. I don't know if the Lakers have the gumption to build a team the right way in L.A. We'll see. But that's the reason they're reaching out to Danny Hurley. He rebuilt UConn after the mess that Kevin Ollie left it in. So, again, if I'm Danny Hurley, you offer me a ton of money with a ton of years, it's guaranteed ridiculous dough that I can, go buy my own island and have my own helicopter and never work again, I'll take it. If I get fired, when I'm walking out of the Laker complex, 50 athletic directors will be standing by my car offering me a job. That's why you take it. And two, how much of this is Danny Hurley looks around and goes, well, this bleeping transfer portal and NIL and the wild, wild west and no rules or guardrails or I don't want this isn't what I signed up for. Yeah, I've won back-to-back titles, but this thing's crazy now. I'll go where they actually have a thing called a collective bargaining agreement in the NBA. And there are rules and regulations on player movement. How much of that is it? I don't know. Maybe something, maybe nothing. But here's why it won't work. Or is a 98% chance it won't work. Here are the coaches who are in the cemetery we'll call former NCAA college coaches who took NBA gigs and were terrible. They all have losing records. Rick Pitino, P.J. Carlissimo, Jerry Tarkanian, John Calipari, John Beeline, Lon Kruger, Fred Hoiberg, Mike Montgomery, Reggie Theus, Leonard Hamilton, Tim Floyd. Some of them you forgot even coached in the NBA because their tenures were so god awful. The only guy that's been truly what you would call a slam dunk success was Brad Stevens. I know, Brad Stevens. Left Butler after back-to-back trips to the Final Four. One of those trips almost stole a national championship from Duke. Stevens was a head coach with the Celtics. They made the Eastern Conference Finals multiple times. And then Stevens jumped up to run the franchise. And that's been successful for Brad Stevens as well. He took the mantle from Danny Ainge and ran with it. The other guy, if you want to compare him to the others, because the others were nowhere near successful, Billy Donovan. With Oklahoma City and with Chicago, you can say he underachieved in Oklahoma City with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. In Chicago, it's been okay, nothing great. I mean, he's Red Auerbach compared to the rest of these dudes, but Billy Donovan and Brad Stevens, and that's really it. Someone brought up Larry Brown to me. Larry Brown was a pro coach before he went back to college and then went back to being a pro coach and went back to college. Larry Brown was just a great basketball coach. Like Jim Harbaugh is a great football coach. Forget college pro. Larry Brown is just a great basketball coach. He doesn't count in this. But the guys who left college, went to the NBA without NBA coaching experience previously, that's your list. You even forget about Mike Montgomery being a head coach. He left Stanford to go to the NBA. Reggie Theus left, New Mexico State to go to the NBA. And Leonard Hamilton, you're like, Leonard Hamilton? Yeah, the Wizards. It was a disaster. Tim Floyd was the guy, if my memory serves me, who replaced Phil Jackson because he was Jerry Krause's son-in-law. How'd that go? So really, this taking a college coach and putting him in the NBA, awful track record. And Danny Hurley, never an assistant in the NBA, never a head coach in the NBA, didn't play in the NBA. I don't know if he's been to an NBA game in his life. But again, if I'm Danny Hurley and they offer me some silly, ludicrous, ridiculous contract for a lot of money for a long-term deal, I'll take it. And if it doesn't work, and if I want to, I'll go back to college. So that's the latest on what's going on with Danny Hurley at UConn and the Lakers. All right. We will come back. Jordan Kay, who covers Gamecocks, football, baseball, basketball for the state. We will dig into Jordan Kay's thoughts on this baseball head coaching search next. It's a halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird, we're hanging up until 3 here on the game. Look, you're a guy, you're getting older, you're rolling into your 40s or 50s or whatever the case, and, it just didn't happen like it used to. Nothing. You don't sleep like you used to. You can't remember anything like you used to. Your life drive, professional drive, sex drive, it's all, exercising, you can't get that extra couple of reps on the bench. Then when you try to recover from exercise, you're sore all over. You're sore in places you never even knew you had. It could just be low testosterone. That could be it. Just one way to find out. Call 803-875-MENS. Set up a free confidential consultation at the Men's Clinic of South Carolina. Go talk to Dr. Dan and the staff. Tell them your personalized story. If they think it could be low T, they'll do some lab work. If it is low testosterone, they'll put you on a specialized program, specialized for you, to get you back feeling like you again. Help yourself. 803-875-MENS. Give the folks at the Men's Clinic of South Carolina a ring today. All right, time to talk some Gamecock baseball with our buddy Jordan Kay from the state. So, Jordan, nothing much happening like you thought baseball season would end, a little slow time, maybe catch up a little bit on your life. How's that going for you?
Yeah, I wasn't, kind of saw coming the last couple of weeks, but yeah, I was thinking we were going to just start turning the attention to football season, but not quite.
All right, so I mean, you've been digging into this. You've done some really nice work, putting up different research pieces on the different candidates. Right now, how far do you think this process is regarding the search for the head coach? You think they're still preliminary stage? They moved on to maybe stage 2 of this thing, whittling down their list and the interest and things of that nature. Where do you think this thing could be at right now?
It's hard to say for sure. I think they're pretty tight-lipped with it right now, but I would guess they're kind of in the preliminary stages. I think it's very telling that none of the coaches have come out and said, I'm sticking around or no interest or anything like that. So I think they have a lot of calls to make. I think Ray Tanner knows that he has a lot of calls to make. And kind of the lucky thing for them is a lot of the guys that I think most people are saying, hey, they need to look at this guy or they're looking at this guy, a lot of them lost. And that's a really good thing for South Carolina. 2017, they were trying to go get Kevin O'Sullivan, who was leading the Florida Gators into Omaha, and then all of a sudden he won the College World Series, and he's not leaving it. And so I think they were able to speed up the process a little bit to the point where we're probably going to hear more over the next week.
Jordan Kay hanging out with us from the State newspaper talking about the vacancy at Gamecock baseball. Terry Ford, halftime show, rolling until 3 here on the Game. One of the things that gets talked about is how much money can South Carolina spend on a baseball coach. Feels like you want to get a guy that's a dude, it's going to cost you between $1 and $1.5 million. Except for Godwin at East Carolina, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But in what you've done and who you've talked to and how you've researched this whole situation, South Carolina, do you think, A, they can, and B, will they creep into the 7 figures if they have to?
I think so. If you look right now, they are drastically behind. Not drastically, but they are behind most SEC college football. For fiscal year 23, which was basically a lot of 2022 and 2023, the financial reports, South Carolina spent the 11th most on baseball if you include like Oklahoma and Texas. So definitely in the bottom half there. The other thing is like they just spend a lot less on just general things. I guess not a lot less, but LSU in recruiting spent almost $172,000. South Carolina spent just over $70,000 in recruiting, which means the men's soccer team spent more in recruiting than the South Carolina baseball team, which definitely for an athletic director who works so heavily with baseball, some of the numbers are a little surprising, like how little they've actually given to baseball. And I kind of think this might be one of the things of like, hey, regardless of the coach we hire, like we have got to start maybe putting some more resources into the recruiting and some other things to make sure we're at the level. So I don't think, Ray Tanner has necessarily not gotten candidates in the past because of money. And it'd be hard to think that would be one of the sole reasons they can't get a guy this time.
Now, real quick, how surprised were you when you dug into this and saw, wow, Ray Tanner's a baseball guy. He's the AD. I thought they'd be spending more money on baseball than they are. How surprising was that to you?
Yeah, very. They're not, to be clear, they're not super far behind some schools. I think Alabama was spending $200,000 more than they were. Wake Forest is spending the exact same amount. So they're not so far behind, but you look at the Vanderbilt, the LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Texas A&M. They're spending almost $2.5 million more than South Carolina. And so that part's surprising. The recruiting piece was very surprising. That's also not necessarily indicative on the budget. It could be, maybe they just didn't use all the money. So some of that stuff is hard to know. That's not necessarily their budget. That's what they spent.
Right.
So if you don't, it's not necessarily, they could have had a bigger budget and didn't spend it, which perhaps that would be even more telling. So yeah, no, it is surprising that to look at some of the other schools around the SEC and see that they're, at least giving $100,000 more, and to see South Carolina behind in that respect. To dig through the numbers and notice that Mark Kingston was one of the lowest paid coaches in the SEC was shocking to me. I guess I had never really considered it or dug into it, but him only making $725,000 in a conference that is paying guys almost 50% more than that was really surprising.
Jordan Kay hanging out with us from the state, talking about the search for the next South Carolina baseball coach. Halftime show. Terry Ford, Ed Bird here on the game till 3. All right, if you're handicapping the field, give me the top 3 right now in your mind. I know things can change. It's fluid, things of that nature, but just your gut feeling on the top 3 guys. You don't have to put them in a particular order, but if you just want to give me the top 3 that you think is probably a little bit ahead of the others.
Yeah, I would say I think one is Louisville coach Dan McDonnell. He's just been at Louisville for a long, long time, since 2007. He's had really good success. I mean, took them to a College World Series in 2017, took them in 2019, but has only reached the NCAA tournament once out of the last 4 years, 5 if you can count COVID. And so this could be one of the times where it's like, hey, maybe I'll look for a change of scenery. I've heard from, reporting from the Big Spur and others that he has a really good relationship with Ray Tanner. That's a name to know. I think the big fish out there is Cliff Godwin in East Carolina, a guy who took this job about 10 years ago and just started winning right away. 40 wins his first year, a super regional his next year. He's been to 4 super regionals in basically 9 seasons. Let's take out the COVID year. They've hosted a super regional. Granted, he's never made Omaha. He's gotten to the 3rd game a couple times in the super. He hasn't made it. I know he probably would like to go to a College World Series at his alma mater in ACU, and that might make it tougher for him to leave. But he's a guy for a long time. I think a lot of people in college baseball are like, that's a dude who does way more with way less. And if South Carolina wants to keep, spending at the rate they are, or in the bottom half of the SEC, you kind of have to look at guys like that of like, hey, who can do a lot with not too many resources? So I think he's perhaps the favorite right now. And then behind him is the real polarizing one in Monty Lee, the South Carolina assistant. He was an assistant under Ray Tanner too. Polarizing because I think there's a lot of people who didn't like how things were done in the Kingston era. They didn't like the on-field product. And it's really hard to sell, hey, we're going to take someone from that staff and everything's going to change. Now, perhaps it can. Different coaches have different philosophies. A lot of times people are good soldiers. They're not going to go against the head coach's orders. That's fine. He had a lot of success at College of Charleston. Monty Lee then goes to Clemson, has a lot of success early, goes to a regional in his first 4 years. He had a really good team in 2020. They were 14-3 before COVID shut them down. And then 2021, 2022, he doesn't go to an NCAA tournament. Eric Backage takes him over, and look at what he's doing at Clemson. So I think that's kind of the hard part with Monty Lee is like he was a head coach before. He had kind of a roller coaster level of success, like very high and then kind of low at the end. It's hard to really, gauge what he could do at South Carolina. The thing is, he has a lot of ties to the state. He is definitely loved by the players. He is loved by the recruits. I think we've seen that over the last couple of days of recruits coming out and saying, hey, hire Monty Lee. And, some of the players being like, yeah, hey, maybe if Monty Lee was the coach, there would probably be more retention. And that's great. But I think sometimes we always forget that this happens in literally every single coaching vacancy, like ever. Every time a football coach is hired, people are like, you got to hire the DC, hire this guy, hire that guy. And it's so emotional in the moment. And sometimes it works. And I think, you think of the Dabo Swinney hire. Even Notre Dame right now, Marcus Freeman is doing decent. You think of things like that, but there are so many times when it doesn't work. And it's really hard to be like, okay, are we going to hire this guy because he's going to retain our guys and have keep a good recruiting class? Is that enough? Is he going to be able to turn around from there? And that's a really tough decision. Makes it even tougher that he coached alongside Ray Tanner and 2 are friends.
All right, last thing for you in our final minute here, Jordan. Is there an under-the-radar guy that maybe we're not talking about enough that we should be keeping an eye on? I don't think necessarily. It's really hard. I think there's so many of these top candidates that if they get below like 4 or 5 of them,
people are going to be like, what the heck is going on? I mean, that was kind of the thing with the basketball coaching hiring. It was Lamont was kind of, I don't know if he's necessarily their first hire. Mark Kingston was not their first choice, and they go down a little further on the list. And so, a real wild card, I can't think of necessarily one. I think the interesting name is the Tennessee assistant. Josh, man, I can't even remember his last name. But that's a guy right now who's still coaching in the Super Regionals. He is very widely respected with a program that, Tony Vitello has kind of turned around there. Josh Elander.
Yep, Elander.
And has been really well respected by players, by his fellow assistants, by Tony Vitello. Like, that's a guy maybe it's, hey, if we want to kind of take a little bit of a swing here, someone that, again, we probably don't have to, give $1 million to, maybe he's the guy who is like, hey, this guy has been at a great program. Let's take a chance on him and see what happens. There's that. I think maybe the other crazy one is like Kevin O'Sullivan, who South Carolina had interest in 2017. That would probably take a lot of money. It'd be pretty tough. I think Florida's still playing right now. It'd be really hard, but maybe one that perhaps if some other options happen, could come around. I don't see it, though. I think there's probably 3 or 4 guys that Ray Tanner is looking at, and it would be pretty tough to think that a lot of them would turn it down. Heck, Monty Lee said that he wants the job, and so you would think that Monty Lee's probably the second or third option, and he's saying he wants the job, so it'd be hard to see it getting below that.
Jordan K., we appreciate you. We'll bug you again before this is over with. Thank you, my friend.
Appreciate you so much, Terry. Have a great day.
You too, man. We'll see you. Wrap it up with our Firehouse Subtext of the Hour next on the Halftime Show in the Game. All right, Firehouse sub text of the hour, 803-404-6100. And what's trending at 2, the big national story of Danny Hurley, head coach at UConn, 2-time defending national champions.
Is it Dan or Danny? Which one are we supposed to call him?
Well, he was Danny when he played. I guess now that he's an old man who's bald, he's Dan.
Okay. I don't know. I
remember as Danny Hurley, who wasn't as good as his brother, but better as a coach than his brother. Not as good as a player, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, Danny Hurley, Daniel, Dano. Here's the text. If LeBron stays in L.A., Hurley won't have control of the team whatsoever. Everybody knows LB's running whatever team he's on due to his complete lack of respect for people who are his so-called coaches. Look, we know LeBron's a coach killer. He's killed a bunch of them in his career. There's no doubt. But how much does... And LeBron put out a tweet about how excited he would be about Danny Hurley because the offense they run at UConn.
Amazing.
And I said this earlier, and you and I yipped about this on the phone earlier today. Look, if I'm Danny Hurley and they offer me $6 stupid money for a long-term deal, I'll take it. I'll go to the NBA. 95% chance I'm going to fail because that's what happens to college coaches. But if I do, I got a lot of money in the bank, and as soon as I walk out of that complex, there's 50 ADs at my car want to offer me a job in college again.
Well, here's the thing, if I may.
No, you may not.
I don't disagree about the college guys that go and fail, but can I say this too? Mm-hmm. Most guys hired as NBA head coaches fail. The cycle of running those guys in and out across the league is generational, Terry, and you know that better than I.
Mm-hmm.
So is it that college guys fail, or is it that because it is such a players' league, very few coaches have the personality coupled with the ability to succeed in any sustained way? There's only so many Pat Rileys, Greg Popovich's, and those guys. Spoelstra feels like some kind of weird outlier. Dude was like the film guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's only there because he has a strong leader of the organization.
Yeah.
Because LeBron wanted his butt fired 3 months into the Miami experience, and basically Pat Riley looked at LeBron and said, "You play."
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, but when I see, when college guys go to the NBA, they fail. When NBA guys go to the NBA, they fail. How many top assistants? This guy fired.
You're not wrong because it's a players' league, especially now they just run these guys through. But you look at all the successful ones, none of them, the high level of coaches who have been successful in the NBA, none of them are college guys who transfer to the NBA.
You don't step up, and rarely does that happen in the NFL. I mean, again, Jimmy Johnson is
rare bird,
pretty much it.
I just believe that bringing straight college coaches to the professional ranks, it leads to failure because, again, their whole vibe is with, and I know it's a different age range now, but basically 18 to 22-year-olds. Well, and they are, until now, because it's changing now, they were Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were they were the dictator of their, they ran your life and controlled your. Remember, we're not far off from where your scholarship was year to year.
Right.
So that world, you go and then go deal with grown men who make more money than you, who have families. I just think a lot of those guys, because they feel so godlike on the college level, can't make that transition to being the communicator they got to be on the pro level. And some of them are really good recruiters, not great X's and O's guys. If you're a head coach in the NBA, all you're doing is breakdown film, scouting, coaching. I mean, Phil Jackson was rare because he really was a motivator and left Tex Winter and the other guys to coach.
Yeah.
But I just think it's a tough transition.
It definitely is. But I think people like what Hurley does with his offense and how it creates in ways like Tex Winter's old triangle did. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's something to that. But there's another thing. When Elijah and I are going to talk about this, it's not bad for the game.
No,
and people are saying this is terrible for college.
No.
This is not new.
No, I mean, guys do it. It's just we don't have time for it, but our guys going to do it more because of the lay of the land.
Maybe.
Good talking with you, man. We're done. Post-game show next.